California, I see.
In one piece, yeah. Good. Didn't stay long enough in one place. Two.
Yeah. Two.
Welcome back.
Isn't it neat?
Yes, welcome back.
Pretty good shape for the shaker. Yeah, you shaved me. I didn't wear my tie today. Or this. My condition is in. There you go.
I know that song. She just dropped in.
Say, if you remember it, you might not
I know, well, Kenny Rogers in the first edition.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Just dropped in to see what condition by condition he was in.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 8th, 2018 City Council Study Session. Will we call roll, please, Teresa?
Deputy Mayor Baggett,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember DeCoursey,
Here.
Councilmember Holman,
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa,
Here.
Councilmember Twalt Monroe,
I believe she's on her way.
Councilmember Wales.
Excused. I understand we have an need for an executive session, so we thought we would do this right up front and move right ahead with the executive session. So this should take no longer than 15 minutes, we anticipate. So with that, we will call a recess for the executive session.
Deputy Mayor. If I could interrupt,
Yes.
the executive session, we have to state the reason for the executive session.
All right.
So the executive session is authorized under RCW 4230-110, sub 1, sub 3, which allows council to discuss with me the legal risks of a proposed action or current practice that the agency has identified when public discussion of the litigation or legal risks is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. We've asked for a 15-minute executive session, also under the statute, although we say the time, the statute would like us to announce the time we will return, so that would be 5:46. And if we could, we need the mayor, director of finance, and Ms. Whitson Moore.
Thank you.
Take a seat here.
We will resume our regular session, and I don't believe there's any special announcements, reports, or presentations, so we'll jump into the agenda items. And the first item is ordinance for degendering Auburn City Code.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As proposed in the packet, as we were looking at revising the city code, one of the things that we noticed, and sort of to review what's in your agenda bill, is that our current code dates back from 1957. Male pronouns were pretty much exclusively used. As time has gone on and we started to recognize the fact that not everybody doing the work or being in charge are males, we started changing it to he/she, he or she. In the last 5 or 10 years, it's kind of unwieldy. So the best practice is to use gender neutral or non-gendered or degendered terms. So when we were looking at doing that, we talked to Code Publishing about what it would take to do that with our code, and the cost is, I'm not saying it's nothing, but it's not very much at all. It's under $5,000, and that's money that my department has in its budget. So while we were also looking at that, so that's one of the things we're asking for, because state law allows us to modernize language, and we'll be looking for your authorization to just tell the code revisor to do that. And we'll do that where it makes sense, where the regulations or the law are not specifically based on a gender. There are some things in our licensing code for sexually explicit businesses where the requirements are different based on gender, and in those cases, those will stay the same. So that's the first part of what we're going to ask council to do. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, the next piece is just a little bit of information. While we're in doing that, this is our current website. I don't remember, I think we updated it when I was here before to this color scheme and general layout. And while we were talking to them, they have some functionality, additional functionality that they can do. They want to migrate our code to their new platform. And so their new platform, the municipal code, let me give you a little bit better. This is what our city code looks like right now. You can expand it this way, or you can expand it this way, and this is the publicly facing code. And it's pretty easy to use, and it's pretty searchable, and you can export things into Word documents for editing or for research or other things. The city of Bellevue is on the new platform. It's a cleaner look. It provides for, tells you when it's been revised. You can expand each of the sections for a little more clarity. The other things that we can get with the new, it's got some additional navigation tools to skip from section to section. The other thing that we get when we change the platform for a slight additional cost is the clerk's office can transport over to them all of the original ordinances and resolutions. So when you look in our code now, at the end of the sections, it tells you the ordinances. Those would actually get hyperlinked to the ordinances. So when you're doing legislative history and trying to figure out how the code is developed, it'll take you back to the original ordinances and let you track through that. It's a very useful thing for people that are trying to figure out how did we get here, Well, it will make it easier for us to respond to public records requests, because if something's on your webpage, you can say you can get that information on our webpage. Would all be rolled into the same cost of doing this other thing. And it's, we've looked at it, the clerks have looked at it, and they've told me that it's much cleaner, much easier to work with, and easier to search for. And that's it, unless y'all have questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Not so much a question, but more of a statement. I've spent about 2 hours on Bellevue's website, along with their mayor, who was so proud of it when they switched over. And so I'm actually fairly familiar with their system. It is far superior to ours. Plus, it may give our clerk's office a little bit of relief from information requests. So it costs a little money to convert, but it may save us a little bit of labor permanently.
That's what we were thinking. All right, if you don't have any more questions, you'll see this ordinance at the next
And as-
vote.
Oh,
No,
Councilmember Pelosi.
continue. I was just trying to get his.
oh, no, and it's, the other part is gender neutrality. And it's time. It's only been, how many years since we, oh, you're the first female mayor. Anyway, yeah, we should.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Statement, I agree. Money well spent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll move on to resolution number 5384.
Send some handouts here around the table real quick. Good evening, Council, Mayor, Josh Arndt. I'm an Economic Development Officer here with the City of Auburn. Just want to quickly start off by saying kudos to you guys, along with the Planning Department and the Planning Commission. I think it was about a year ago when you guys authorized Ordinance 6660, which essentially changed the EP zone back to the M1 zone. Because without that, what I'm about to go over simply wouldn't be possible. So 302 Lund, which you can see on the map there, it's highlighted in yellow, and it sits right next to two privately owned 5-acre parcels located just south of Maine, between the Highway 167 overpass and the UP tracks. That is a property, it's about 8¼ acres that the city purchased back in 2006 for about $180,000. And it was purchased for what was called the overall enhancement of the area. In 2011, city environmental staff, they did a wetlands analysis report on that property, and they determined it to be a Category 2 wetlands. But they did also note that the property had a high potential for wetland enhancement used to compensate for off-site wetland impacts. Along with that, when the city received the deed from King County had stipulated or put a covenant on that deed that stated that the City of Auburn covenants that any use of the property inconsistent with its current use of wetlands shall be mitigated in accordance with the State Environmental Policy Act and other applicable codes. The city may use the property for any uses that are compatible or associated with water quality, wetland mitigation, enhancement, stormwater control, passive recreation, or related uses without any such mitigation. It further went on to state that the city shall place the same covenant in any deed transferring the property or a portion of that property to somebody other than the city. And just doing my general research some time ago, when researching this property, I noted that the property really wasn't being used for anything. Made a note of it, and actually at that time in the attachments that were part of the agenda, you'll note that the property report on there, and on there it was I marked that for it to be considered as surplus property. I sent an email out to all the department directors as well as some other staff and asked if they could identify any current or potential future use for that property, and nothing was sent back as being identified for that. So at that time, I just kind of let it sit because ultimately, I don't believe that as a standalone, the property is really worth all that much. Rather, its true value is going to be as part of an assemblage to a larger accumulation of properties for development. So last spring, we got in contact, had some contact with Pape Industries. For those of you, if you're not familiar with Pape Industries, they are a distributor. They sell, lease, maintain heavy-duty equipment. They had recently purchased the exclusive rights to Kenworth to become their exclusive distributor of the Kenworth 18-wheeler trucks. They began conversations with them about opening up a Pape Kenworth dealership here in Auburn, and was able to get them and come in for a visit and a tour of the city. Specifically, their interests were in opening up truck sales and leasing, repair services, and then the sale of replacement parts. While they were here, I had the opportunity to show them the assemblage of properties that you see there, and describe to them that really they're, 2 of the 3 parcels are privately owned by separate individuals, and that the city owns the portion there on the west side in yellow. Explained to them that it did have a deed restriction, covenant on the deed, and kind of what that meant, but I pitched them on my envision for the property as a whole. They seemed to like it, so they asked, well, okay, what's next? More as a temperature gauge to really kind of see what their interest was, I said, well, here, go talk to the owners of the individual private property owners and see if they're willing to sell. I knew from previous conversations that even though the properties weren't on the market, that if a deal came along, they would be willing to sell. So to my surprise, about 60 days later after that initial visit, they came back to me and said, okay, we've got the private properties under contract. What do we need to do next? Understand that for large-scale commercial development, that is a very, very quick time frame. These things obviously take time. So with that, I said, well, again, explain to them the process, and so the first thing we began to work on was any sort of term sheet that I could then take before you guys. That you also have in your packet, but I wanted to touch on a couple of those items. First and foremost is the sales price of that. You'll note that the price is based upon an MAI appraisal, as is our code, as is RCW. But there is a floor. We do have a floor, the floor being $200,000. So even though I think the actual sale of the land of itself is really a small portion to this deal, I still wanted to make sure that at the very least the city got the money back that we paid for it, okay? So $200,000 is the floor. However, if an MAI appraisal comes back at a price higher than $200,000, $250,000, $300,000, whatever that price is, then that becomes the purchase price. If the appraisal were to come back low, below $200,000, then we're still at that $200,000 floor. Okay. Now, as is typical in most real estate, especially commercial deals, if the buyer looks at the appraisal and says, I think that's flawed, I don't agree with that appraisal, they do have the opportunity to conduct their own appraisal. If their MAI comes back at a 15% or greater delta between the two, then we've essentially agreed to say, okay, well, we'll split that difference. So again, as long as the appraisals are higher than the $200,000, our purchase price for this property will still be based upon an MAI appraisal. If it's lower than that, then at least we've got our floor. The second thing is the feasibility study. Now, again, Pape has a desired project that they're looking to do with this deal. So really everything is based upon whether or not they can do what they intend to do with that property. And that's why there's feasibility studies. The initial feasibility study being 6 months is typical to maybe even a little bit on the short end for a development like this. But we did put in clauses for there to be 2 additional 3-month periods, but they do have to buy those, okay? We don't just automatically give it to them. Again, protecting our interest. And then, of course, just, again, thorough understanding that deal comes together, we convey this deed. It comes with the same covenant placed upon the deed that it currently does now, okay? That's the basic deal points of the property purchase. But as I said before, really that's really a small portion of what I believe is the bigger deal here. That being the economic impact that a development like this could have for our city. Now, the second handout that I passed around was basically just a letter from Mike Patty, who's the general manager of Pape Machinery, expressing obviously his interest, but also giving a little bit of insight as to the development and what that would bring to the city. The one thing that he fails to mention in there is the initial investment based upon other properties similar to that in the area that's theirs. They expect an initial economic investment into our city to be in the range of $4 to $5 million. And that's for the land development as well as the vertical construction of the buildings to suit their needs. That does not take into account their business property on the inside, which, as you guys are well aware, that becomes taxable interest as well, okay? A development like this, they anticipate to bring 35 to 45 new jobs to our community, okay? Those jobs being spread out, being a mix, of management, sales, technical, and operational positions. That's all well and good, but what potentially makes this better is in talking to them not only about the number of jobs that it brings, but the wages that it brings with it. I shared with them what Auburn's average their average hourly rate is, and they figure these jobs on average will bring 40% higher annual wage than what the city's current average is, okay? This also doesn't mention taking 3 properties that are currently being underutilized, being in vacant land, and raising their overall real estate tax base, and actually in our case, taking it from being not even on the tax roll to putting it on the tax roll, okay? Increasing and then again increasing the real estate tax base on that. And then finally, probably the best part of all of this is a business that not only creates jobs, not only brings a high wage with it, but also produces a sales tax revenue. When they look at their 6 other properties in the Pacific Northwest region, they shared with me that these properties each pay in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $3 million annually in taxes, okay? When you bring that back to the development and the sales, leasing, on-site maintenance of these machines, that equates to a sizable bump in the city's sales tax collection, because that's some of their stuff is done off-site, but a vast majority is done on-site, which hopefully is right here in Auburn. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Councilmember Pelosi.
A couple of questions. The property immediately adjoining Auburn, West Auburn Avenue, who owns that parcel?
So there's 2 parcels there. The far east one is owned by Sigali and David Litowitz. And then the one directly east of the city, you have to pardon me because their names are not coming to me, but he's based out of Bainbridge Island.
Okay, what about egress, regress? That parcel is kind of like in the back.
Well, so the parcel, so that's where the actual development, as they're conceptualizing it now, and keep in mind it's early in the process, would be the 2 5-acre part, the private parcels. Those would be the actual development site. Ours, in part because of the covenant on the deed, would be used for enhancement or mitigation of wetlands that are currently on those 5 acres, as well as, you know, possibly stormwater. Obviously, they would have to go through the normal development channels that we have here at the city. But conceptually, at this early stage, that's what they're looking at. And so, with that said, ingress egress would be off of Main Street there.
Any other questions? Councilmember DeCoursey.
Josh, in their letter, they mentioned, and you mentioned the 6 other nearby equipment dealerships. Where's the closest one to us now? You know?
So currently they have one in Des Moines. That one, however, they don't own the ground, they lease the ground. So they've shared with me that they could possibly consider actually closing that location down and bringing those operations to Auburn as well. But we've got that one. There is one in kind of North Tukwila, South Seattle, and then there's also one in Lakewood.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. With the state's plans for 167 being opened up all the way through to the Port of Tacoma, which will be a truck and freight route, this is a perfect location for them. That is going to do nothing but grow. Plus, the trucks would have direct access to 167 without coming into the city directly. So I don't see any downside to this. I see more employees, new jobs, new tax revenue, sales tax on construction. Better than market rate jobs. This is a gold mine. And Kenworth is a Northwest product.
Yes, they are.
The union shop.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
So
Councilmember Troutman.
once they decide to do this, we all decide to do this, when do they look to start doing stuff?
So,
What is their timeline?
so right now, obviously, we require council action to even have our property available for surplus, and then to negotiate a binding contract with them. Due diligence in any process, doing due diligence through any process costs money. So they have begun some, I'll call it lightweight, kind of investigatory, that word, thank you, due diligence, but the bulk of it will come providing you guys, pass the resolution to allow us to surplus and enter into a binding contract. Once we have that contract, then at that point that's when their time frame begins for doing their due diligence. Once that was done, then they would begin right away. They've been very quick to move thus far. So I don't see, at this point, I don't see why that would be any different.
Okay, and just a comment, I have to agree with my fellow council member Holman. This is a gold mine. This is something that will bring in a lot of jobs, and we've been talking about bringing in more jobs and stuff into our city. And the tax revenue that we'll be getting, we're looking to where we're going to get money for our roads and stuff. So this is an addition. It's a win-win.
Again, we've got a process to get there, but I absolutely agree.
Any other questions?
So just for the record, I would be in favor to see us go forward with this.
That's a general consensus.
Concur?
Thank you. Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the 2019-2024 Transportation Improvement Program modification.
Good evening.
Sir James.
James Webb, Senior Traffic Engineer for the city. So, feels like we just finished doing this, but we're back again. So, this discussion item is for the addition of a new project to the 2019 through 2024 Transportation Improvement Program. A copy of the project sheet was included in your packets. It's for the signalization of the intersection of 10th Street Northwest at the AB corridor. So it's the intersection that's immediately to the west of Fred Meyer. It's currently a T intersection. It's stop controlled on the 10th Street approach. And it's been determined that the intersection no longer meets our adopted level of service standards. So an improvement is needed to that intersection. The appropriate improvement is to signalize it. That is an improvement that was planned when the corridor was built several years ago, and some of the infrastructure was included with that corridor construction to be able to accommodate the signal in the future. And now is the time to add this to the tip. The reason that we're doing this at this moment in time is to allow us to then, with Council's adoption of this as a new project in the tip, is to be able to include it in the annual update to the traffic impact fees, to be included with the as part of the 2019 fee schedule. So the plan is to, at the council meeting on October 15th, to set the public hearing, and then on the council meeting for November 5th to hold the public hearing and to adopt if that's council's direction. So if anybody has any questions.
Any questions or concerns at this time?
I guess maybe just a comment that I think it's a really wise move, seeing that need has grown, I think, using that intersection.
Yeah, that new corridor has attracted a considerable amount of traffic, so yeah, yes, especially you.
Yes, especially.
It's time.
It'll calm a bit of the traffic down, too.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to review ordinance number 6688, a new zoning code definition for community support facilities.
Good evening,
Good evening.
council members. Nathaniel Gauck, Senior Planner, the Planning Department. As mentioned by Councilmember Baggett, the ordinance proposed is a new zoning code definition to be called, or to be titled, Community Support Facilities. This particular definition was requested by Nexus Youth and Families, who I know the council is pretty familiar with their operations and services they provide. This definition is that's included in the ordinance here would essentially fully encompass everything that Nexus currently does, as well as what they have planned for their future uses and provision of services for at-risk youth, young families, and young adults. Those are their essentially they're the people that they try to serve and help. The Planning Commission had several discussions on this matter, or on this new definition. One at their meeting in July, or in June and July, and then directed the staff to notice for a public hearing, and a public hearing was held in September. Originally scheduled for August, but it was held in September due to cancellation of a planning commission meeting. But the definition was reviewed by Nexus Youth and Families, and it was essentially developed or based off of a list of uses and services that Nexus provided to staff, and then there was some back and forth, and ultimately came to the definition that's included here. And Nexus has indicated that this does fully include all the uses and everything that they would like to provide now and into the future. The use is proposed to be an allowed or a permitted use in the C1 light commercial zoning district, which council may remember last year. Nexus owns 6 parcels near Lesco Park, and last year they moved or proposed to, or requested, I guess, to change 3 of those parcels to C1 light commercial. So the boundaries of their campus are now all zoned C1 light commercial. So this use that encompasses all these different types of activities and services would allow them to continue expanding and provide all the types of services that they want to well into the future. This wouldn't be restricted to Nexus only as being allowed only for Nexus. It would be any other entity that met the requirements of the proposed definition in the C1 zoning district could also pursue doing the same or providing the same types of services. And there are some other similar uses in the city, such as Valley Cities, that provide similar, maybe not exactly the same services, but might be located in a different zoning district. So they're at the time they might be governed by a different set of rules, or when they were developed under different sets of rules. With that, I'm happy to field any questions. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission made a unanimous decision or recommendation to City Council to approve the ordinance as proposed.
Any questions? Councilmember DeCoursey.
Council item for me here, and I appreciate Nexus bringing this forward, but in looking at the definition, it's somewhat narrow because it restricts it to ages under 26. So my thought would be, if we're going to have community support facilities within the C1 zone, eliminate the age restriction and allow those organizations who do these types of services to provide services to the general population.
Strongly concur.
Sounds good.
I thought of that too, and I was reading it. There's an organization that might provide, senior services, for example. Precisely.
That makes sense. It opens it up to the general public. Any other questions? Would you take those under consideration?
Yes, definitely. Would you like to have a staff to bring it back at another study session, or maybe you could bring it back for?
I think just a modification of the statement would be good enough. Just send that to us, or send it through, the channels we need to send it through.
I'm ready to vote on it.
Yeah, remove the age.
Okay, so it'll require some wordsmithing to the ordinance to remove some items, and we can definitely look into that and bring it back.
Yeah, bring it forward.
I believe October 15th is when next week is when we'd like to have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I will turn the meeting over to our focus area chair for the finance area, and that is Councilmember Holman.
Okay, we're going to talk about money and spreadsheets and all sorts of exciting things, and watch everybody leave. First item under 4A, monthly water usage billing. This is the Shelley Coleman show.
Yes, yes. Well, not really. I'm just going to introduce it. But with our automated meter reading that we have now, all the meters are installed.
And as you know, we're going to go through and talk about doing monthly billing of the commodity, water, versus every other month. And Brenda Goodson-Moore and Shannon Bennett from the utility area of finance are going to walk through the process and how they're going to do it and when it's going to start and all that other good stuff.
Hi, I'm Brenda Goodson-Moore, and I'm the utility billing manager, and Shannon Bennett is the billing supervisor. And we're going to talk tonight about transitioning our utility billing customers to monthly consumption billing. So currently, our residents receive a bill for their base rates for water, and then they receive their consumption billing every 2 months. So go ahead and go to the next slide. This is an ongoing source of confusion for a lot of customers to this day. We get phone calls, you know, why is my bill so much higher than it was last month? And then we explain because it's a 2-month rate. So, okay. So this slide is showing, this is actual customer data. You can see this customer in our current model, we bill, their bill is $133.24, and that's just a base rate for bill for July. Then you can see that the next month in August, we're billing them for consumption for July or June and July on their August bill. And this particular customer has all 4 services, so water, sewer, storm, and garbage. But you can see how that would be, that's quite a big difference month to month. And because it's summer, it's a little bit higher because it's, you know, they're irrigating. But under our new proposal, their bill would be much more even. Now, this is assuming that they're using the same amount of water in July and August, but you get the picture that we're talking about. Okay, so this slide is just another demonstration of that same concept. You can see that the fluctuation between a base rate and a consumption bill. Clearly, this time period is between October of 2017 to September of 2018. But you can see in the summertime months where the consumption bill is quite a bit higher than the base rate bill. So in late 2017, we finished installing the automated meter infrastructure. So this technology enabled us to get reads on demand. So right from our desks, we can pull all the reads in from the meters. And when we were in discussions about this particular project, we talked about one of the benefits being that we'd be able to transition to monthly billing with this technology. So starting in January 2019, we would start billing all of our customers every month for base rates and consumption. Okay, so during this process to transition all of the customers to this monthly billing, there will be some transition time. So some customers will see prorated base rates on their bills. And on the December bill, they might see some consumption. So if they're normally billed for consumption in November, then they would see a base rate bill in December, and then in January they'd see the consumption again. Since we need to have everybody on the same schedule in January, then they would see some consumption on their December bill as well. And so we would start the monthly billing for everyone on January 16th, and then going forward we would be billing the 3rd Wednesday of the month. It would be our normal processing date. So in order to get all of the citizens in the know, we would reach out to all of them through several different methods. We would start with a message on our utility bill saying, you know, something new is coming, kind of a brief explanation. Then we would actually send a letter out the first week of November kind of detailing how the billing is going to change. And we would also put a message on our website, and we would also make sure that there was information out on the payment site, letting them know what's going on. We would also put an article too with more information in the magazine that comes out this winter. We typically do reach out to customers in November. Sorry, I just thought about this. We typically do reach out in November to let people know about rate changes. So when we do reach out to let everyone know about the upcoming rate changes, we'll also have an FAQ document that kind of some common questions and answers for everyone. So, okay. And Shannon, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Are you going to have that online also for them to ask any questions?
They can certainly email questions. You mean the FAQ would be
Yeah.
posted online?
Right.
We could do that. Sure. Okay. So Shannon is now going to talk to us about another new thing coming to our customers.
So during all of this, we've been looking and working on this for quite a while, and we're very excited to announce that we have new billing statements that are also going to be coming out. So with that, you can see our new billing statements. It's got a lot of the same information you're used to seeing, but we've also updated the formatting and we've made the statements more intuitive. So this will be some part of the communication that we have with the customers. The biggest change that you're going to notice is that the back of the statements is no longer full of fine print. It's actually a much more useful statement that can give people more information to help watch their water usage, know how to contact us. We just felt like this was something that customers have been asking for, and we're very excited to share that with everyone. So we're hoping that this will help people manage their utilities better and make it overall a better experience.
Thank you. I like that.
Yes, Mr. Pelosi.
I remember I came in about, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, trying to understand, because we had a very large bill, and so we thought we had a leak. Well, as it turned out, we did not have a leak, but so we have a sprinkler system, and it's very expensive water. So you got your base, what, 0 to 7 cc's, something like that, and then 7 to 15, and after 15, your rates go up proportionately. And now, does that billing, does that cover that?
We actually did reach out to our the company that prints the bills for us. We're not able to print out the cost by tier. It's all in the programming of how the electronic file goes over and how they're able to interpret that onto the invoice. I did, after you asked that question, I did go reach out to them to see if that was something that we could do, but it's not something that we can do at this time. But we can, I mean, we do try, when we send out all of the information about the rates, we do have that broken out by tier so you can see what the cost is per tier.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
So I appreciate this change to the consumption basis. I will tell you that this last summer we planted seed for grass, a whole yard, and my son and daughter-in-law were very faithful in watering, and I thought in July I'd escape the pain, but in August I thought I had maybe 2 mortgage payments due. So it'd be nice to spread that out a little bit, to not have it all come at once, so that was pretty cool. Thanks.
I think a lot of customers don't really realize how much water they're using and how much it costs, but every summer it comes out.
Got a very nice looking lawn now, but it cost.
Yes, Ms.
Yeah, I have to. I as well have underground sprinklers, and we have them on twice a day during the summertime, and then our swimming pool we have to fill every 3 days. So I was, as well as Mr. Pelosi, I got my statement the second month, and oh my God, I came in to find out why it was so high, and they explained it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're turning it off.
A bunch of water users.
We are.
Sticker shock.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
I do have a couple quick questions if, wait. We will be putting out notice either in the FAQ or directly to the low-income seniors that this will not affect their rate. It's just a different way of billing that's more predictable for them. Some sort of reassurance that they don't have to reapply, that they're covered. And for those of us that use the online payment procedure, that's not going to change?
No. Nope, it stays the same.
I'm happy.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I've got
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Pelosi.
So, I checked with the CFO, Joyce Pelosa. I checked with her, and she loves this new billing system because, like you said, it is confusing, and it'll really make things run smoother up there in the finance department. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I think it's a great system.
As long as Mr. Pelosa's on the kudos, I think I'll add one too. I had a leak, and I got an electronic notice. You have possibly a leak. And so I ran around the house. I found the leak. It was on an outside hose bib, had it repaired within 24 hours, and I asked for an adjustment. And I was able to be notified so quickly that I didn't even qualify for an adjustment. My rate went up I expended less than $1 worth of water. So, yeah, I'm all for this electronic metering. It saved me a gob of money.
Yeah, it's amazing how we've had customers before that have gone 2 months leaking and not even knowing that until we go out and read the meters again, and now we can see it. You know, there's flags that go up and alarms and.
Within 24 hours. So, thank you. Any other, okay, we're second quarter 2018 financial report. Director Coleman.
Got a fruit fly, that is. Are we doing the developer cost of fee service or the second quarter financial report?
Yeah, item C is the financial report.
B.
Oh, B. I'm sorry. I've gotten ahead of myself. Developer fee cost of study, cost of service study.
Here, I'll move over to the
I'm out of practice.
Senior moment.
I qualify.
Okay.
Sure.
It's a fruit fly, and it may bother you. Yeah, it's kind of, you want to inhale it.
Okay.
All right. I'm just going to kind of kick this off, and then it's going to be Jacob and Jeff that take it over, but I just wanted to set the stage. If you recall, in the spring of 2017, the city entered into a contract with FCS Group to do a fee study analysis of our building, planning, and engineering fees. And Finance administered the contract and worked with the contractor, who also worked with engineering and planning. And the consultant came back in February of this year, earlier this year, and provided a presentation to you at that time. And to recap that, we found out that our building services, we were recovering 101% of our costs in our building and permitting fees. However, when we moved over to the engineering services and the planning services, we found that we were recovering a much lower percentage of the costs. And we are now looking, Finance has reached out to engineering and planning to go through their fee schedule and bring forward some recommendations for the upcoming fee resolution.
And what you'll see on this slide, we'll end with this slide too, so, but just to tee up what the policy questions are for council. First of all, the fee resolution that council adopts every year, the most recent one being Resolution 5319, has a statement in there. It's been in there for probably 15 years. And it says, whereas in the course of reviewing city fees and in keeping with the philosophy of setting city fees and amounts reflective of actual costs. So one of the policy questions is to ask, does that philosophy remain intact or not? Municipalities have an ability and an authority and a right to make decisions about what cost recovery is and how much the general fund will support development review or how much the customer supports those fees. So it's a check-in on that question. And then the second item is, as Shelley showed on the last slide with the graphs, there are some really low cost recovery percentages with some of our fees. Now keep in mind, when you see that fee schedule every year, you see a resolution that has about 22, 23 pages of fees. There's a lot of fees. So one of the things that we did, and you'll see on the next slide, we've identified a few of the areas where we have really low cost recovery. So is it appropriate in this next round of fee updates to remedy that? The third item is seeing if council is interested in having a discussion in 2019 about other fees and the cost recovery policy. So we're not asking council today or even in 2018 to answer the cost recovery policy question, but we do recommend that we start talking about that as a broader objective. So the next slide shows the fees that were called out through the FCS study that are particularly low for the recovery rate. And you can scan this slide real quick and you can see that there's two categories. There's planning fees and there's engineering fees. I'll talk a little bit about the planning fees and Jacob will talk about the engineering fees. You'll see the column that shows the number of applications that were processed in 2017 for each of those items. You'll see the total amount collected in 2017 for each item. So that's not a per application fee, that's the total of all of the applications and the fees collected for those applications last year. What that equates to in terms of a cost recovery, so you'll see different numbers there on what cost or what revenue we're collecting versus what it really costs to perform the work. And then you'll see that we're proposing a few recommendations for just these 8 or so fees, changing the cost recovery rate. And you'll start seeing that on the next slide. So the planning fees that are shown here, just to orient you to what's on this slide. Across the bottom, you'll see the different application types. So SEPA review, preliminary plat, each of those applications has a bar. And as you look up, I'll just describe this for SEPA review, but it applies across all the bars. The green on the bottom is what the fee currently is. So SEPA review, it's $851 for SEPA environmental checklist submittal. The hashed line above, hashed area above the green mixes green and blue, and that's what the fee would be if we went to a 50% cost recovery for SEPA review. You can double that obviously and see what the full cost is. So SEPA is just over $3,000 in staff expenses to review. So that same principle applies all the way across this chart, and what it would look like if council, if we incorporated in the 2019 fee schedule and council took action to get the city to a 50% cost recovery for these 6 different types of planning applications. SEPA review preliminary plats, rezone applications, reviewing mixed use and multifamily design standards, then grading base fees and fill fees.
That's Mr. Brown.
Yes, so could you remind me on this chart that you showed that where the adjustments might take us? Again, that SEPA figure that you show there, that is total for the year for the city?
On the table.
On the table, right.
On the table, it is, get to that slide. right there on the screen. So it's $10,738 is what we collected for all 13 applications, SEEP applications.
And so you would be proposing to take that to 50%. So my question is this, I mean, to the extent that we're not covering the cost of the process, one could call that an incentive or
Yes.
a subsidy, or I don't mean to use legalistic terms. I'm not applying it that way, but in terms of the interest that we might be looking at for this city for other public policy objectives, I mean, could you comment on that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly, some cities go with an approach of 100% cost recovery. Some go with 80%. You know, the numbers are different across the board. Even at a 50% cost recovery, that's a friendly business or economic development friendly recovery rate. There are reasons within the different types of applications to choose to make a conscious choice of pursuing one recovery rate over another. A lower recovery rate can be talked about in terms of keeping fees at a reasonable or stable level. I will say that in comparing to other municipalities, and I know councils are always interested in that type of information, I can email you a graph that shows you that even at 50% cost recovery, we're still lower than, for these 6 different applications, we're still lower than our surrounding communities. So that's always important. I don't think final decisions on development are generally made on the fee costs, but I do think that it's an important bullet point and a collection of items that we would say in the economic development world.
So the next area that we looked at for the cost recovery were the construction permits. Construction permits are administered through the engineering department, and they are issued for any work that's in the public right-of-way that's not being done by the city. There's 2 bars on this chart. One to the left shows smaller construction permits. These make up a very small percentage of the actual construction permits that we issue. Typically, it could be a homeowner who's going to go out and install irrigation in the right-of-way in the landscape strip. It could be a power service connection for a business or for a homeowner. We don't see very many of them, but there are approximately about 2% of those smaller construction permits. When we looked at the construction permits, which you saw before on the chart, right now have an 18% cost recovery, which is very low. We broke it down and we could see that actually these smaller construction permits really don't take a lot of our time, don't take a lot of effort, and we analyzed and found that we're really already achieving 100% cost recovery for those small construction permits. So we're not proposing any type of change to those. Right now we average about $150 for those smaller permits, and those would stay the same. 98% of the construction permits are on the right. Those are the larger construction permits. Typically those are applied for by franchise utilities like PSC, Verizon, other providers that are installing significant infrastructure in the public right-of-way. That takes more time for us to actually administer, to review, and to inspect out in the field. That's why you see currently we only collect on average $250 for each one of those permits, where our cost is approximated to be about $1,200. That's a big chunk of where we're getting down to that 18%. What we're proposing is actually go up to full cost recovery, 100% cost recovery for these construction permits by raising the fee and getting up to that $1,200 average for the larger construction permits, which make up a bulk of what we're handling. Doing so would bring our fees collected using the 2017 mix of permits that we got from around $70,000 to about $400,000, which is a significant increase.
Questions, comments?
Mr.
Corsi.
Well, Jacob, you mentioned Verizon PSC, so are there others that are incorporated within this part of construction permits, or is it mainly those types of providers?
No, absolutely. I mean, they're larger projects, and the larger projects are typically done by either franchise utilities, but also other agencies that are coming in. We have King County Metro that will come in and put sewer lines in and whatnot, and we just see that
the bigger our city gets, the bigger a lot of these permit applications come in for, and our fee structure probably didn't really originally consider those large projects, so we're behind on collecting those costs.
Mr. Plaza.
I can make this comment either at the end or now, so.
Oh, please, now.
If we were running a small business and we were charging these type of low fees, we wouldn't be in business very long. And I think it's absurd that the city supplements some of these fees when we could go 100%. And I'm for 100%. I mean, why are we giving away? We're not protecting the public's tax dollars if we continue on the way we're going. That's it. Thank you.
So moving on to the next category within engineering, our facility extensions, or what we call FACs. So facility extensions, this is work that development activities are required to do in the public right-of-way. So these are typically called half-street improvements. But really what it is, if you have a single-family home being built along an unimproved roadway, often you may need to construct a sidewalk along the frontage, or a portion of the roadway, or lighting or storm drainage. Those would be the small examples. The large examples would be a large subdivision that comes in and builds all new roads and all new utilities and lighting systems, sometimes even traffic signals or storm pump stations. That would be one of the larger FACs or extensions. So these fees are meant to cover costs for the city to bring in those applications, to review the plans for that infrastructure, then to actually administer the construction, to inspect the construction, make sure it's being built to city standards, then ultimately transfer the ownership of those public facilities being constructed by the developer to the city's possession for operation and maintenance. So we looked at the FAC fees in several different categories, broken out by the types of projects for which they're being charged. So what you see are 5 different bars here that represent the different types of projects. On the left are large subdivisions, then small subdivisions, commercial projects, residential, and then multifamily projects. Across the board, all these different types of projects are about at 18% cost recovery, which is quite low. And we looked at each one of these projects and said, okay, what's the average permit fees that we're collecting now? And those are the lowest numbers next to the bright green across the bottom. For instance, the typical large subdivision, we're currently collecting $5,800 on average for a large subdivision. As compared to a commercial project, we're typically collecting around $6,000, or for a residential development, around $1,900. If we were to go to full cost recovery, which are the numbers along the very top, something like a large subdivision would be up into $32,000. The commercial would be up to $33,000. The residential would be up to $11,000, which represents a very significant increase. So instead, what we looked at for now, which would be something we propose to bring with the 2019 fee schedule, would be going to a 25% increase, a baby step. And given this is within our current fee structure, and I'll talk about that in just 1 minute. So a 25% cost recovery would bring that large subdivision up to $8,000, the commercial from $6,000 to $8,250, the residential from $1,900 to $2,750. So it's still actually a pretty significant dollar increase. But once again, the larger the project, it's a smaller percentage of what the ultimate overall cost is for the permits for, say, a large subdivision. But I'll get into that more in just a minute. So if we went with a 25% cost recovery, that would increase the revenues using the 2017 numbers by about $35,000. What we propose to do in the future, in 2019, we want to come back and start talking with the council about maybe restructuring how we actually charge for the facility extensions. Because just a flat-out increase to 100%, as you saw across the board, it creates some very hefty fees that maybe for some of the smaller projects could actually make them not pencil out, make them not feasible from a financial perspective. So some of the ideas we had that we would propose to talk about more next year would be maybe looking at having different cost recovery targets for different types or sizes of projects. Maybe for a large subdivision, we're at 100% cost recovery. That's our target. Maybe for the smaller projects, we're not at full cost recovery target. Maybe it makes more sense because those projects may not be able to bear the cost of that full recovery. Other things we could look at is changing our structure to try to encourage quality plan sets that are submitted and allow us to efficiently review those plans. That helps us actually reduce our costs if we have a structure that encourages that. And somehow charged by the, if it takes more reviews or if it takes more time to review it, somehow account for that in the actual system that we have to charge those fees, to calculate the fees. And then finally, another idea would be to account for the construction duration. Right now, if you have two broad projects and they're each building 100 feet of water main, one project takes 2 years and the other project takes 6 months, our fee is the same. But we spend a whole lot more time and effort inspecting the construction that takes that longer time period. But it's not accounted for in our fees now. So those are some of the ideas that we'd like to come back to you early next year and start talking about maybe not just raising all the rates, but looking at a different structure.
Yes, Mr. Baggett.
Just something to consider. I realize that the city has very few things we can do to affect our economic development when it comes to cost and things of that nature. So it's really a subsidy that we're allowed to do out of our general fund. But I would like to see something that compares some of our other cities to see how we fit within the spectrum of our neighbors competitively, if you will, when we start looking at modifying some of these costs. I know that gives us an opportunity to encourage more economic development for our city by subsidizing some of these costs, which are the very few things that we can do to encourage our contractors and what have you to come into our city, our customers. So I would like to see what we would have there in comparison to some of our other surrounding cities.
I think that's an excellent point. We certainly plan on doing that.
Mr. Corsi.
Jeff, you mentioned sending out an email that can give us some of those comparisons. I'm just curious, can we have the data that would show like the facility extensions? Can we do an apple for apple comparison? Is that data available from other cities?
So I can send out something that helps with the planning fees, because we structure our fees very similar to other municipalities. I think it gets harder with the FACs.
The facility extensions are difficult because everyone has a little different structure. We can do some things. Some ideas is try to take equivalent types of projects and try to compare those. It just takes a little more time for us to research.
I think just some examples of that to give us an idea of where where the barometer might be for those other jurisdictions would be very helpful, because they are low. It is an incentive somewhat, but and I agree when we look at a baby step kind of a process here, it would help. But at some point in time, I think we're going to have to take that green and get it much higher.
One quick comment that, yes, I don't think we have a true subsidy in this. For instance, a SEPA review. The city receives benefit from the SEPA review. The fact that we are paying 50% of that SEPA review, we receive as a city and our citizens benefit also. So it's not just a strict subsidy, it's city benefit too. But then your comments were well received on what it does in our competing with other jurisdiction. And then for further study, I'd also like to see my colleagues, if there's some, well, we'll see what the consensus is, but I'd like to see us look at a fast-track processing fee, because these large developers are bringing in multi-million-dollar projects. The cost of money to them is based on time. And so if they were to want fast-track engineering, they may be willing to pay 125%, so that you could bring in a contract engineer, a contract planner, or somehow pay for it. They come out money ahead. There's several successful fast-track programs. We could reach out to Mr. Lean in economic development. I believe his old city of Las Vegas has a fast-track program. And there are other examples of that. And I've been in conversation with other developers whose frustration is time, not money. So a fast-track fee, if you're willing to pay for it, I think it might be a revenue maker to offset some of this 50%.
Yeah, just to comment on that, because when I was with the Housing Authority, we would have certain projects that were very time sensitive, and we were very willing to pay the extra fees to get that fast track through the system, and it benefited, you know, both ways. So
as long as it's out front and open and transparent.
In some cases, you have to put staff on overtime to do it. We were willing to pay that premium fee to do that, to make sure we get the project underway when we need to get underway.
I asked my my fellow council people if they would see interest in you expending some time in a fast-track program.
Just another quick comment.
Of course.
During our Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting this past week, we finalized the 2019 legislative agenda. And one of the items in there, kind of somewhat related to this, was to bring forward to the legislature modification of Local Project Review Act. So we get a procedural completeness review. So kind of bundling things together that would, in some sense, serve the fast tracking process. I know we already do some of that, but to kind of get even more simplified in state law to be able to give the local jurisdiction more opportunity to have more flexibility in doing that.
And it really benefits me when it's simple.
Yeah, absolutely simple. Gotta be simple. Yeah.
Jeff, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, just the final couple slides.
Oh, okay.
One of this next graph, what it intends to show is what would happen from more of a cumulative bottom line effect if council was comfortable with advancing as part of the 2019 fee schedule those cost increases to get to the 25, 50, or 100% cost recovery depending upon the application type. So you'll see there in that first bar, planning fees. If council was comfortable with going to 50% cost recovery on those 6 fees, it would have bumped the 2017 numbers from a total of $95,000 to $158,000. And then on the engineering side, using the 2017 numbers, it would have bumped revenue from $356,000 to $720,000. So collectively between the two, about $427,000 or so in additional revenue based upon the 2017 permit numbers. So we thought that it would be important to convey that, what it would mean overall. And the last slide brings you back to the original bullet points of policy questions. So it's great, I think, from a staff perspective to hear that there's dialogue and there's probably some different opinions about what cost recovery means and what the appropriate policy is overall. That's what we'd like to come back in 2019 and talk about. For now, we're asking about the for this next fee schedule cycle, if council has a general comfort level of at least pursuing those 25, 50, and 100% cost recoveries. You know, we want to have the conversation that you just started having, and it's hard not to jump in and just start talking about some of those ideas and how you would address fast tracking, and if that's, you know, to 100 or 125% cost recovery, and, you know, talk about that as a program. I have a lot of questions and thoughts. I'll refrain now, but and then going through application by application. You're right, SEPA has some public benefits. Building new city infrastructure with private money that becomes the city's infrastructure has some public benefit. So you do have to almost go through a variance for a single-family residence, you might say, that has no public benefit. It only benefits the person who's making the application. Other applications do have some public benefit. And I'd also mention that I personally want to be careful about making sure that we're not at 100% on some applications till I know we're truly efficient. I mean, it's not fair for the customer if we could be more efficient, but because we're not more efficient on a certain application type, that they're paying for that inefficiency. So, I mean, those are the kinds of things we'd want to talk about. There's higher compliance rates on certain types of applications if the cost recovery is a little lower. So there's lots of stuff to talk about and comparing with other jurisdictions, and that's exactly what, when we get into 2019, we'd like to have that big conversation.
Yes, Ms. Troutman.
I would be agreeable on having you come back to us with those numbers, with the 25, starting at 25, 50, and up to 100, to bring them back to study session.
Nods around the table?
Well, I want to be clear on that. So so we're asking right now for the 6 planning and the 2 engineering fees, if it's okay to just fold them into the next fee schedule. And then all the other, so we probably, we wouldn't be thinking of having another study session focused on that. It'd be, here's the fee schedule, the 2019 fee schedule, and then look at all the other fees in yet another conversation. So, does that make sense?
That makes sense.
This is going to take multiple bites,
Yeah.
but I think this
Makes
bite
sense.
is, I hear consensus.
Okay.
And just a quick summary, the consensus seems to be that this is a bite in the right direction, that we need to remain competitive with our neighbors and surrounding communities, but in deference to my colleague, Mr. Pelosa, we also need to protect the public's money and get as much value out of people that are building in our community as we reasonably can without destroying growth in our community. Is that a reasonable summation, colleagues?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is it time to say thank you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Holmes?
Yes.
Can you take like a 5-minute break?
Absolutely. 5-minute break.
Thank you, sir. Sometimes nature calls.
There you go. Ouch.
from their point, they don't want a bunch of people getting hammered and getting on the red eye. Didn't do me any good.
On our way to
Good idea.
Well, been advised, we've
Perfect.
hit our 5 minutes.
We did. Plus, plus.
But who were these in this year? You're here anyway.
Yeah, Jamie's supposed to be here tonight.
You're a good guy.
Well,
Yeah, it's,
okay, we've been about 5 minutes.
Thank you for that break, sir.
yeah, that was nice.
Absolutely.
And that's my icon.
Yes.
Little leg stretch in.
Hey Larry, are there any of those peppermint candies?
I ate one of those.
I've got one in my desk.
Somebody put these almond joys in here, my favorite.
Oh,
Huh?
Almond joy.
Throw it over.
I got one more here.
Here, I'll take it.
Almond Joy?
Oh, yeah, man.
Got it?
Here you go, here's one more.
Oh, no, just,
Come on.
here's enough. Oh, he's got. Thank you, John.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll come back to the table and back to order. Okay, now, second quarter 2018 financial report.
Yes,
Director
yeah.
Coleman.
After we've just finished the third quarter, now we're going to talk about the second quarter. But I'd like to reiterate this page, or page 39 of 109 and page 40 of 109, is the same information, but one's just presented in a graph and the other's presented in a chart. And of course, I'd like to go on to the expenditures first to show that all of our expenditures are within budget through mid-year. Now, on the revenue side, we do see some things that are not all green. We do see some red. The property taxes, it's just a little amount, but when you think about it, and we're in a rising interest rate environment for mortgages, we're not seeing refinancing like we did. So when there was refinancing that was going on, the property taxes would be paid for the entire year. So now with fewer refinancing, we will get those property tax, the balance in October. We will get our property tax. So it's just a symptom of our market, our housing market and refinancing. The development and service fees, we talked about those a little bit earlier tonight, but we are not progressing as well as we had hoped for this year in our budget. They are down from last year, was down from the previous year, and they are down again this year. Our intergovernmental, the difference there has to do with the annexation sales tax credit that is over, and we received the last payment in June of this year. So that was just it's really close. But we came in about, that's on the intergovernmental. We came in on page 40 of 109 under the sales tax annexation credit. We came in close to 200,000 under what we had anticipated we would receive. You know, that's it. We're also moving down that page of 40 of 109. We go down to leasehold excise tax, and we see 143,000 favorable. Well, that is the leasehold excise tax that the Muckleshoot Indian tribe pays over at Emerald Downs. This is the third year we've received it. It has not been budgeted, and we'll make sure that we get that. We don't know if we're going to get it, what the status of Emerald Downs will be as far as becoming tribal property or not. So we really don't want to program that revenue in, not knowing the timelines. So it'll be, we'll just say be on a wait and see attitude on that one. Moving down into building permits, you can see that our building permits are down from, let's see, from 20, actually the building, oh, that's business license. Building permits are less than they were by about close to 300,000 the same period prior year, 2017. And following that, you see down on development service fees, which is our plan review fees and such, those are down also. Now, what I would like to point you down into interest and investment earnings. We're doing pretty well there, and we will talk about our investment program, but we're gaining steam.
Ms. Pelosi.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I was looking at him instead of you.
Oh.
Can you, the gambling excise tax, we were at a double-digit tax, right, at one time?
We're at 12% under, yeah, yes.
And what are we now?
4%.
4. So when are we going to review that again?
Well, we can do that.
I mean, this has been discussed about a year ago, wanting to have some type of discussion on looking at that fee. We know why we lowered it, but those times have come and gone. So I think that we should look at the casino, it's the Iron Horse, right?
Correct.
So I think we should have a little discussion council-wise on how we want to proceed with that.
In addition to the Iron Horse card room casino, that includes pull tabs, punch tabs, and we had the businesses come in and ask for basically a survival reduction. We did it temporarily, and if memory serves right, we then made it a permanent rate. So it is permanent now. That's why we haven't had a recent discussion on it. I think if we were to raise the rate, we would have to seek input from our business owners that operate pull tabs, punch boards, whatever they're called, and the Iron Horse, which said with a rate increase they'd go out of business. But you're correct. We need to see if things have changed. Right. Yes,
When was
Ms. Troutman.
when was that set permanently?
Help?
No.
What was-
I remember when we first started, we were discussing it.
I was still
It's
on
quite a
council.
while. It's 4 or 5 years ago.
I was still on council at the time. That's when, yeah, some of the taverns in the town came in. It wasn't just about the one casino, but it was more about all of the pull tab businesses that did that.
But then we had a review one year, and then the next year, rather than renew it, we just made it permanent.
Well, we're talking about apples and oranges here. Pull tab tax is different than a card room. The card room is a 4% tax on the income. The pull tabs has to do with either you tax on the gross receipts or on the net receipts. And one of them is more favorable to the business. They like to tax on the net receipts after prizes.
But in which column does that show up in here? I
That
mean, it's
is
so insignificant.
probably down here in other miscellaneous.
Oh, Mr. Plaza.
My comment was not toward pull tabs. It was the subject 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever that period was, was the casino only. And that's what I want to discuss.
The card room.
Yeah, yeah. Look at that, and I don't recall the 4% being permanent.
It was voted on to be permanent. Council did vote to make that a
Well, that
permanent.
can come up in our discussion then too. When was that after our initial okay? Because I don't think we went permanent at the get-go.
Not at the get-go. It was an interim, I think 2 years, and then it lapsed. Didn't hear from the owner at the time.
But
Assessed the 12% until we came back, but it's under new ownership now.
we need history
Okay.
and discussion, what we want to do.
And just a comment, you also have Emerald Downs now with a portion of theirs that are open for
And we-
casino operations.
Get card room
It's owned by
tax.
the tribe, and we don't get revenue.
We don't.
We do
Well, we
get,
do right now.
we do now.
That was that nebulous, we don't know when that's going to be. So that could change.
Okay.
That
The-
which we
Yeah,
have
the
very-
real estate excise, or the leasehold excise tax that we receive, they don't pay property tax. In lieu of the property tax, they're paying leasehold excise tax. We don't know what the status of that property would be. And the card room and the taxes on those activities, that's a different tax. And we are receiving card room revenues, or we have been. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, though.
Ms. Troutman?
Oh, no, I was fixing my hair, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'd do mine, but
You're beautiful already.
But since you call on me, you know, I would like it to be brought back so that we could review that. If it's already been permanently set, it would just be nice to review it and see, you know, what else could we do? Since some of our council members weren't here when we passed it and talked about it, and it's been 4 or 5 years, I think it would be nice to have a refresher on it.
Is there general agreement? We'd like to see finance give us a summary of gambling revenue, all sources, and the applicable ordinances.
Would that potentially be something for the matrix kind of thing?
I've got it down to add to the matrix here when we get to that.
Sounds good.
Okay, then I see enough head nods that we have a consensus to look at that again and educate ourselves, because it certainly exceeds my memory.
All right. And the last thing I'd like to note on page 40 of 109, that the score jail, where we show that we are 18.7% under budget, that's only 5 months of payments. The June payment hadn't been made, so if we add that in, we'll probably be closer to budget. Pages 41 and 42 and 43 are the executive summary for the first quarter. And it summarizes some of everything we've just talked about. One thing I'd like to note is on page 41, last paragraph, the first sentence. Year-to-date general fund expenditures into the period 2.9 million or 9.2% higher than expenditures through Q2 2017. That just shows the trend of our budget. I know I'm talking about that ad nauseum, but it's an important thing. Let's see.
John, I have a
Yes.
question. Back on page 40, the score. Since Federal Way has pulled out on being partners on that, how is that going to affect Auburn?
So, if I might, Federal Way has given notice that they intend to leave as a member city at the end of 2019. There are currently subcommittees working through what different funding models could be with and without the city of Federal Way included, so that it's not just Federal Way. All cities have talked about concerns over increasing costs at SCORE. And so with a new executive director now, we are looking at what costs are in excess of what we want them to be and what revenues might we be able to raise, similar to what we're going to be doing as a city here in the future about future revenue and potential expenditures. So that is a subcommittee that currently Shelley and Chief Pearson are on, so that the Finance and Operations Committee are included in that discussion from each of the 7 cities.
Okay, and is it 84 beds that they, if they do leave on 2019? So those is it 84 beds that are going to be, all the cities are going to take? No? How's that?
No,
Okay.
so there are contract cities. Those beds could be put out for other cities to utilize.
Okay.
There are potentials for the Department of Corrections to be able to utilize more of those beds. And it could be that we decide that we have to close down a pod in that jail facility or a wing. So there aren't any definitive answers yet. It's all a matter of what are the opportunities, what are the risks going forward, and a model including Federal Way and a model excluding Federal Way.
Thank you.
There's even a possibility of Federal Way becoming a contract user.
No.
No?
It's really too early to tell, working on these committees. It's just too early, and I think everything would be speculation at this point. We need to work through, but we did meet on Friday, and we have some things that we've asked for, and we've got Burt Consultants on board. We've asked for certain things to come back by the 1st of January, first quarter, and then so we can have a report to the admin board by April 1st of next year, well in front of budget. So it's way too early to even start speculating.
Thank you.
Okay, property taxes. This is our graph to show you, we receive property taxes, as you well know, as you pay property taxes twice a year, April and October. We're following that wonderful trend. Sales and use tax. This is net of revenue from construction, so this is what goes into the general fund. Our sales tax is up on the general fund side this year, about 5%, so that's good. And we have taken that increase that we're receiving this year into consideration when we prepared the 2019-2020 budget. And we're down a little bit this year on sales tax on construction, which goes over to our local street fund. However, even though that is trending down, it's still well above the budget that has
This is
been.
year to date.
Yes, this is year to date. But, yeah, and this is a 2018 budget, but you can see that this dark line, we're well above budget, but we're a little bit below last year. Not a lot. Where we're doing well, on page 46 of 109, is in the automotive and the services sector. Those have some nice increases year over year. Services are about 9.4% up. Automotive, car sales are doing well at a 6% increase over prior year. I'm not mentioning some of these others that show a 16 or 12% because the revenue, those aren't real large revenue bases in the big scheme of things, but it's great that they're up. Let's see. Utility tax. Here's our utility tax. It's trending on. This is at half year. There's nothing remarkable there. Cable franchise fee, that's right on track. It's a pretty flat revenue from year to year. The cable
Yes, Mr. Pelosi.
Back on 49, cable franchise fee. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, that's a cable franchise fee. Cable TV is the only utility that is required to pay a franchise fee in this manner, and it's 5% of their gross revenues, and the city has levied up to 5%. The city has levied that 5%. Did many years ago.
Okay, that's the max already. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
And then the cable utility tax, that's the newer. You can see that that's pretty much following. 2017 actual, I think that that line is much lower because it shows this is cash basis, and because first quarter wasn't received till second quarter and so forth. And so now this year, cash basis, we'll get all 4 quarters, but when we do our financial reporting, we do what's called accrue the fourth quarter payment that we received in January of this year. We accrued it back into last year to match the revenues to our expenditures. Business licenses. This is all about the timing of when those business license renewals go out and when people send them back in. And you can see that on the graph at the bottom of page 51, it kind of pops up and down from year to year. But on average, I think we could say the city probably receives about $200,000, maybe $210,000 a year. And building permits, we've talked about these. And you can see that we have not a real robust line here. The dark shaded area is our budget. The dotted area is what we received last year, and we're quite a bit below what we received last year. This shows here that through, this shows through June, there's about $500,000 that have been received. I checked today. Through today, there's been about $750,000 collected. So that's, you'll see that on the third quarter report. Intergovernmental revenues. Nothing too remarkable there other than we are seeing our streamlined sales tax mitigation.
John.
Mr. Pelosi.
Can you back up to page 54?
54?
We haven't got there yet.
Oh, we're not there
We can
yet?
go forward to it, though.
We can go forward.
Then I'll wait till we
Okay.
get there. Thank you.
All right. Our intergovernmental revenues, the only thing really to mention here, which you can't see on this graph, but it is on page 53, that our streamlined sales tax mitigation payment is falling. They're taking into account this Marketplace Fairness Act revenue. Through the first quarter, they're saying that the city received $70,000 about in Marketplace Fairness Act revenue, and so our mitigation payment was reduced in June accordingly.
Ouch. Ms. Pelosi.
Okay, that page, you're on page 53 now. right?
Yes.
Could you cover the marijuana revenues? It looks like we're making some headway.
Well, let me explain that, and I'm prepared for you tonight on the marijuana tax. This is something that MRSC is not even going to attempt to provide us revenue estimates on in the future. But I'm just going to read the paraphrase. The 2017-2019 state budget adopted last year reduced the anticipated marijuana excise tax distributions for cities and counties by 60% from the original $15 million per state fiscal year to $6 million. There was a caveat, however. Should the February 2018 forecast of state general fund revenues be at least $18 million higher than the June 2017 forecast, then the distribution would be restored to $15 million. So that's what you're seeing, is there was a one-time payment in, I think it was in March, for the first and second quarter of 2017 to catch us up. And we will then get our payments through the end of the year. So March, we received $100,000, and for each of the following quarters this year, we'll get about $46,000. Now, there is even a further caveat on this where the state intends to reduce it back down. And the exact formula to calculate the distributions to any individual city or county is based on population size. And those are released every June. Therefore, and it also has to do with jurisdictions that allow marijuana in their jurisdiction, in their city. And it's become very difficult. It's so complicated and frequently in flux as governments continue to take action on regulating and prohibiting marijuana that they will no longer be providing marijuana excise tax estimates for jurisdictions. So that's up to us to kind of figure out what's going on. So that's the marijuana story.
Any follow-on, Bill?
Well, no, I mean, I knew it was in flux, but I wanted to hear it from.
It was a good explanation.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Page 54.
Ah,
Okay, before we begin, Mr. Pelosi.
Okay. If you look at page 54, and it's actually page 16 at the bottom and the top, look at the last sentence in the last paragraph under public safety revenues. It says majority of the favorability seen in this revenue source is due to extra duty overtime reimbursements exceeding budget expectations, due to increased requests for police officer security services. Can you give
That is the
a
extra duty.
description?
Okay. The police do extra duty work. It's through the guild. Right.
Like
And-
Fred Myers as an
Right,
example?
so the city bills for that work to the businesses, and but the city also pays the officers at agreed upon rate for their guild work or for that time spent. And there's been more contracts that have been executed, therefore the city is billing for more revenue. But on the other side, we're going to see increased expenditures it's in the overtime budget, but it's not at the rate, it's at a different rate than what they're earning normally, and it's just their guild.
We're getting full payment for those officers
Correct.
by the business?
Yes.
Okay, good. That was my question, thank you.
All right. Development service fees, we talked about these earlier. As you can see, our little black line is buried well below the budget. And you can see we've kind of been in this falling revenue mode. Culture and recreation, we're doing a little bit better than budget. This is a mid-year. Fines and penalties.
Mr. Pelosi.
Where, I'm looking at page 55, at the very top paragraph, last line. Most notably, Willow Place. Where is Willow Place?
Lee Hill.
Thank you.
What?
Lee Hill.
Lee Hill.
Yeah.
Where?
Near 312 and 124.
Okay,
Close to Willow Park.
close to Willow Park.
It's in the Willows.
I would have left that name off the report.
Full
Okay.
transparency.
Okay. Where are we at? Fines and penalties, doing a little bit better than budget. Miscellaneous revenues. This includes our interest earnings, our rents and leases, contributions and donations. And what's doing really well here is our rents and leases and our interest in investments. We're getting close to the 6-month treasury rate now on our investment package. It's tough to chase that rate with 25 basis point increases every 3 or 4 months. It's, it's going to take us a while to catch up.
Yes, Ms. Troutman.
What's our rents and leases?
Well, we have, we rent the community center, the senior center.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Real estate excise tax is strong this year. We're a little bit ahead of last year. And in the budget, we kind of budget a number. We generally don't spend the money until we have it. So, we haven't really lived on the edge of what that revenue might or might not be. So that's why we see budget so much less than actual revenue. And you can see that it can be kind of erratic in nature. And here we go. Here's our pet licensing. Now,
Let's let her make her presentation.
okay. It's a little bit early to tell yet because it took them a while. Our vendor that we had, Pet Data, they didn't want to give up the data. They wanted to do it till the very end of their 60-day notice or 90-day notice. So before AVHS could get in there and really start doing their thing. But you can see that in May and June, that the licenses sold and revenue kind of jumped up there. As of today, the revenue, and I don't know where they're at in the timing, they deposit, we get it, I think, every week, $100,000 in licensing revenue. I do not have the data on how many licenses have been issued, but I will have that for next quarter.
Now, Mr. Pelosa.
So you're on the board.
Yes.
So, in your estimation, how can we improve from 2,099? How can we improve that? Now that Auburn Valley Humane Society is in full control.
Well, they're on the contract. They need to show an average of an 18% increase year over year in pet licenses sold. And let's see, last year they sold, I'm trying to look here, they sold about 4,500 licenses. I don't know to this date how much they've sold, but they've sold through today, or through second quarter, they've sold, looks like close to maybe 2,500. So they're jumping up. And when I looked at the July, August, and September numbers, we're averaging about $11,000 in revenue. And I don't know, I don't have the license numbers for what they issued.
It really discourages me when people have pets. Our neighbor has 2, and my wife babysits when they leave, and they're not licensed. They're indoor cats, and they're not licensed. Is there some way we can incentivize?
Well, it's getting the names, and we're doing a lot of things. We're getting the adoptions out of King County. We're getting a list from King County of all the adopted animals into the city, and the Humane Society is sending out license applications for those adopted pets. They are doing pet licensing clinics. They did a mailer in our utility bills. They're getting ready to send out another citywide mailer. We're looking at what kind of lists they'd use if they're looking at just getting a USPS mailing list to mail out a broad mailer. It's getting the name of the person who has the pet and the pet information, so you can get that application to their house. And then there's a percentage of those that when they do get the application form, that'll actually fill it out and return it.
I mean, it really burns me. It's unfair. I mean, here we got this beautiful facility in the city of Auburn that makes it available for all pets, and people take disadvantage of it. It's unconscionable. It is.
Did you drop a dime on your neighbor? Saying.
You know, if you want to send any information to ABHS. I'm sure they'd be happy to send your neighbor an application.
My wife's been talking to him.
Good.
All right.
Now, so so we don't see any of the Humane Society's budget in
Not
this?
in here, no.
So where do we see it?
Well, it's at their board meetings.
Oh.
And I can certainly bring a summary or send you out a memorandum on the
Yeah, I think
center.
it'd be interesting for
Okay.
the council to see what their budget is and expenditures, revenues.
I'll send you a little summary.
Because I am a first line member of that society. That's why I have so much interest. I was one of the people that laid out a few.
And I know for a fact that Feline Palooza has a license.
Hell, yes. I have a tag to prove it.
Okay.
All right. Capital project expenditures, we talk about the street funds from page 62 of 109 through 65, 66, 67. You know, our actual, this is through June, so a lot of our projects, a lot of the contracts were let in June and the work to be done. Then you know that we had that little work interruption with labor disputes. So we may even see some of these payments drag out into the fourth quarter, or the paving that has just recently been done. So if you have any questions on these, that's great. Let's see, water revenue, or water sold versus water revenue. I have some graphs in here on solid waste. Let's see, I want to go back to, where is, I don't see the graph in here. On page 68 of 109, as we have talked about, our building and permitting fees are down, as well are the mitigation fees that the city charges. An example would be like transportation impact fees are at mid-year are 25% of budget, where it should be about 50%, which all them parks are at even less than budget. I don't see that chart on here. Then here's cemetery. The red line, which is revenue, is above the blue line, which is expense. That's what we like to see, or the purple line. Here's another chart that we've added that shows our P-card transactions as they increase from year to year. That means we're doing fewer purchase orders and more P-card transactions. And then we do get that incentive revenue. On page 74 of 109, this is where I was talking about, at this time, the treasury, the current 6-month treasury rate was 2.11, and we were at 1.850. It's totally different now.
We're blank page.
We don't have a 74.
You don't have a 74? Oh, okay, well, I will.
Electronically, it's here.
Okay, it must, if it's there electronically, I don't know, but I can pass it around if anybody'd like to look at it, but we are investing and getting out there now. We're starting to ladder our investments because there is benefit in doing so. When the rates were 25 or 30 basis points on $1 million, it was more effort to do the transaction and journal entries
Well,
on the money.
that is just super good news,
Yeah.
because I remember times when we were making less than 0.25%.
Yeah, yeah, yes. We're down to 11 basis points.
Remember times when we were making 8, 9, 10% too.
So, happy days.
Yeah. And then you have the sales tax report through June. And then we have our enterprise and internal service funds. Everybody's doing well. They're in the black. Nobody's has any net losses or anything as of 6:30. Didn't see anything there that was remarkable. Okay. If there are no further questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Shelley.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Shelley.
we're,
Do you want to read about marijuana? I've got this here too. I know this is a riveting topic.
She came prepared tonight.
well, that's an argument that we have to take to the legislature about fairness.
Well, we do get retail sales tax on some things.
But that's our job. Okay, one last item on finance, economic development.
Speed reader.
So, good evening. Doug Lean, Economic Development. Josh Arndt, our assigned Economic Development Officer with the Downtown Business Improvement Area, is going to do their annual report.
I want to thank our guests for their patience sitting through all this to come on tonight.
Okay. Council, Mayor, thank you for having us here tonight. Again, my name is Josh Arndt, Economic Development Officer for the City of Auburn. To my right, for those of you that don't know, I have Mr. Giovanni DeQuattro. He is the board chair for the Business Improvement Area. And seated on the end is Ms. Brittany Carlson. She is the secretary for the Auburn Downtown Association. So I wanted to start off by just quickly giving you guys a quick refresher. I know most of this you guys already know, but the BIA is a special district consisting of approximately 239 businesses situated within the green hashed area there on the right side of the slide. Its general purpose is to aid in general economic development, revitalization and to facilitate the cooperation of businesses and residential property owners for the benefit of trade, economic vitality, and livability. However, more specifically, the BIA tends to, they're allotted 7 special focus areas. All areas are to be done within that geographic boundary, and those are the acquisition and construction, maintenance of parking facilities, decorations of any place located within that boundary, sponsorship and promotions, furnishing of music in public places, providing professional management, planning, and promotion, and providing maintenance and security in the common places, and also providing transportation services within the neighborhood, within the BIA neighborhood. Funding. Funding allocated to the BIA is gathered through yearly special assessments. Those assessments are charged at a rate of 15 cents per usable square foot, charged to the business. There is a floor minimum of $150 a year and a maximum of $1,500. Those assessments are charged on top of the City of Auburn business license, so those fees are assessed at the time that the business either obtains their initial business, City of Auburn business license, and then yearly when they renew. There is a board, an advisory board that consists of not more than 7 persons at any given time, called the Committee of Ratepayers. Their general purpose is to provide in an advisory capacity to the City Council, as well as to oversee the disbursement of funds captured through the assessments in conjunction with those 7 specific functions that I described earlier. Currently, there are 6 members that make up the BIA board. Mr. DeQuatro here is the board chair. Bill Cowart is the vice chair. And Darren Jones, Kelly Jordan, Bob Klontz, and Ronnie Roberts round out the remaining board members. There are 2 additional alternates. Excuse me, 2 additional alternates, Megan White and Ruth Neal Stover. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Giovanni and let him tell you a little bit about what the BIA has been up to.
Good to see you, Mayor and council members. Well, we started off the year discussing if we were going to be able to continue, and happily we've come a long ways. We established and have a circulation of an electronic BIA newsletter. It goes out to all the businesses. It lets them know what we are up to and how we are allocating the monies that they are in charging us with. Part of it is we collaborated with the city and purchased 150 banners. As you can see, we have some samples here. We will be putting them up, and we came up with the designs and the colors to maximize the attention as people were driving and walking through downtown Auburn. And so we were, that was a collaboration of city funds and the funds from the BIA. We also contributed funding towards the marketing and branding initiative that is currently going on. And also then we contributed funding for the tourism board for developing the concierge map that you guys have on the desk there. And then we've also contracted with the Auburn Downtown Association for the development and promotion of different businesses in the downtown area. And as for that, I will turn it over to Brittany, and she will cover the events that are going on this year and hopefully next year.
All right. Thank you for having us here this evening. For those of you that don't know, the Auburn Downtown Association, or the ADA, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with its own set of bylaws and a newly elected board, including Jeremy Hubble as president, Christina Dreesen as treasurer, and myself as secretary, along with 5 other board members. The ADA is a non-dues membership organization made up of businesses and property owners within the BIA boundary. New to the bylaws this year, we added a paid membership option for business owners and property owners outside of the BIA boundary to join as a member. The ADA acts as a contract provider to the BIA to promote, coordinate, and manage events in the downtown area. In 2018, the BIA contracted with the ADA for $40,000. The ADA was reformed in early 2018 after years of being inactive. We spent most of 2018 getting our feet on the ground, recruiting new board members, rewriting our bylaws, creating a new website, and assessing new ways to get our members involved in our activities. In the first half of 2018, we were able to put on a few events, like Auburn's first Mardi Gras, the Auburn Beer and Wine Fest, and we worked with the Parks Department to add beer gardens to all of their events. Still to come in 2018, we have the Zombie Pub Crawl, the Pumpkin Painting Fest, Main Street Trick or Treat, an ice skating rink, a holiday treasure hunt, a Santa house, giving wreath, and a window and tree decorating contest, and we're working with parks to enhance the Santa parade. Looking ahead at 2019, we're hoping to repeat any successful events for 2018 and add some new events. We're hoping to hold a car show, a street fair, a barbecue championship, a monthly pub crawl, and a monthly girls' night out. So now I'll send it back to Giovanni for the BIA's 2018 accomplishments.
And one thing we are currently working on is additional security lighting. There's many areas in the downtown area that are not lit up to where people feel comfortable going and walking and enjoying downtown. So we are looking, working with the city on putting up new lights on the city owned poles. And also we've contacted Puget Sound Energy to see what we would need to do to add more security lighting on some of their poles. And some of the areas that we're talking about are the sidewalk behind the commercial buildings, along the south side of Main Street, along the parking lot that borders Safeway. And then also the B Street Plaza area, the mural parking lot, the alley behind the old Comstock building, and D Street parking lot. Those are areas that some of our ratepayers have brought to our attention that need more lighting, and so we are in the currently working with contractors and purchasing of lighting and seeing what needs to get put up. The other item that we are hopefully will get done by the end of the year is decorative string lighting. We would hope to have string lights up and down Main Street on both sides along the sidewalks. We are looking into putting in speakers so we can play music at different times of the year for different holidays, so people will, it'll be lit up and they'll be able to go up and down Main Street and the BIA area and listen to the holiday music for that holiday that's currently going on. And then looking ahead for 2019, we will assess and address any other areas that need security lighting once we get those taken care of. And then we also are looking in the springtime to do additional hanging flower baskets. Right now we do it down Main Street and in the back area behind the buildings next to that parking lot at Safeway. A lot of our BIA members would like us to include it not just on Main Street, but out in the BIA area, but outside of the Main Street area. So we are going to look at purchasing more baskets and getting it throughout the BIA area. And then we were going to carry forward any projects that were not able to be completed by the end of the year. Our continued partnership with the different community organizations, the City of Auburn, the Tourism Board, and the Auburn Downtown Association. We have appropriated a little over $72,000 for these different organizations, and we hopefully continue doing so next year. And with that, do you have any questions?
Yes, Ms. Troutman.
I am really excited to hear that you're bringing an ice skating ring. Where's that going to be?
Across the street.
That is totally awesome.
She is the one handling it all.
Yeah. You know, what you've got plans here is really going to bring people to Auburn downtown, and it's due time that we're doing something that great. Also, the speakers to hear music and the lights, and that is what I remember when I was a little girl living in Walla Walla. Christmas downtown was Christmas. Having all the lights, having the music, having Salvation Army ringing the bells. It was, you know, just great, and I'm excited about what you guys are doing.
Mr. DeCoursey.
I was going to say that same thing. I mentioned over and over again in this chambers that downtown Auburn reminds me so much of my hometown upstate New York, and one of the things that really stands out was during the holiday season with the extra lights and the music, and it just changed the whole atmosphere of the downtown. So it's just wonderful. And then lastly, the security lighting anything we can do to improve security lighting in the area is just very welcome, so good job.
I had one more question. You said you received $40,000. I didn't hear where you received that from.
From the BIA, we allocated $40,000 to help them with some of these projects.
Yeah, like the ice skating rink and helping us put them all together. We've got to, hire employees to help us run things, so it adds up fast, but they help us.
So the BIA contracts with the ADA to do the promotional side, kind of the fun stuff, if you will. So they had $40,000 of their budget allocated for that. I think thus far they've actually cut checks for 30, and then we're probably looking to bring forth the other 10 here by the end of the year.
And when do you think you're going to start doing the decorating and stuff like that?
Well, for the lighting and the speakers, Josh and I have been working for the last week with looking at purchasing the lighting and talking with the engineers with the city to see what's going to need to be done. Our goal is to get it done this year, but again, it will be up to what we can get done. And, I mean, we're in October, and so we'd have to push really hard, and with the help of maybe the city's engineers and that to get what we need done.
Yes. So, as Giovanni said, we actually met with a lighting contractor, a lighting rep, and we're kind of switching gears a little bit, but we're working with American Lighting down here on Main Street because the lighting rep that we met with only sells wholesale. So we met with the actual lighting rep because it's actually illegal for us to light up private areas, so we can only light up the public spaces. So we need a certain type of floodlight that is directional, that will light up the certain areas that we want to be lit up while not lighting up others. Half of the areas that we're looking at doing are lit by Puget Sound Energy facilities, and Puget Sound Energy will not let you come in and mess with their stuff because they continue to maintain it. So we put together a map for them for these areas that Giovanni had mentioned and said, hey, here's the dim areas, what can we do? And Ingrid and her staff have been helping us with that as well, providing us the contact, and so we'll see, but I think, from what they're telling us is generally PSC is pretty amendable to working with us. In terms of the rope lighting and the speakers and that stuff, again, that's something that we're still in the process of working through, with our engineering staff to see what our current capacity is and what can be done with the areas that we're looking at, and do we need to modify that some or whatever. So hence why maybe some of those projects need to be carried forward into 2019.
Mr. Altman.
No, he answered my questions. Thank you.
Mayor.
So if I might, a couple years ago, Doug, Lean, and I were in this very room, and I wouldn't say we were in front of a hostile crowd, but we were in front of a rather skeptical crowd. That would be a reasonable assessment of where we were. Sitting in this very room, we had a lot of the downtown business owners in here, and we talked about, can we give this a try for 2 years? If at the end of 2 years you don't see any benefit to continuing with the BIA, we'll bring forward the request to council to disband the BIA. There has been an amazing group of volunteers that have become the BIA ratepayers group, as well as the volunteers for the Auburn Downtown Association, who have decided that this is not something that they want to see go away, that they want to see an enhanced vision for all of us and for the people that live here and the people that visit here of what our downtown is. And so I just want to say personally and professionally thank you to Giovanni and Brittany for being here tonight, but also your boards and the other business owners that believe in this and believe in the city that we live and work in to make this a reality. And Doug and Josh, thank you for your work on this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the support. Appreciate it.
Just a quick note, John, you holding up the concierge map. Keep in mind that is only one half of the concierge map. Tourism, who you're about to hear from, they've got a much prettier tourism version that they'll show you as well, I'm sure. But yeah, that was the part that was done in conjunction with them. So thank you for your time.
Any final questions? Just to amplify what the mayor said, thank you very much. Y'all are helping to make Auburn what we are going to be in the future, so. I know
Thank you.
It takes time and money. Thank you.
John.
Yes, sir.
Giovanni and Brittany, thank you very much for all your volunteer work, because I'm a professional volunteer on the side, and I know the work that you guys are putting into this. It's just not 8 to 5.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
And now the tourism side.
Ooh.
Wow. Thank you.
Fancy, fancy.
Oh, yes.
Do you have any council members who are colorblind?
Man, Hyde wouldn't work out. He would only be able to
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lorraine Sashery, and I'm the tourism coordinator for the City of Auburn. Presenting with me is Rachel McAllister, who's a tourism board member and has previously served in the capacity of vice chair. So thank you for this opportunity to share with you some tourism updates. As you may recall, the lodging tax fund is generated by a tax assessed on all completed hotel, motel bookings. So essentially, it's collected from the 8 hotels and motels in Auburn. This fund pays for my part-time position, as well as it is designated by state legislation for tourism marketing. Thanks to your approval and passage of Ordinance 6634, there are 2 entities that are stewards of this fund. So that includes the Auburn Tourism Board, which meets monthly. It's comprised of hotels, Auburn area attractions and businesses, and previous grant recipients from the Lodging Tax Community Grant Program. There's also the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, which is comprised mostly of Auburn hotel owners, as well as executive leadership of Auburn area attractions. They meet twice a year. They assess and evaluate any changes to this hotel motel tax. They review any proposed budgets for use of this particular fund. And they also make their recommendations to you, City Council, for potential recipients of the Community Tax Grant Fund. So collectively, we are driven by these tourism goals, which is essentially to positively impact the shoulder season. So this is considered a slow season for Auburn hotels, and it is a very long one. It's from September to May. So June through the end of August is very robust. It's peak season. People are on vacation. A lot of our Auburn attractions have a lot of enticing activities during this period. And also we benefit with that we have affordable hotel room rates compared with Seattle downtown rates that peaked at the average night in summer was $431 per night. So with Auburn hotel rates, with our location close to the airport, along the I-5, close to the I-5 corridor, we are just a fraction of that. So the goal is to really, put heads in beds through September to May and show them what else is Auburn has to offer. We also really monitor heavily the return of investment on hotel performance through a report, which all the hotels provide all their data anonymously to an agency that provides the STAR report. So we get to see as far as the demand for rooms, how much revenue is being brought, and it's compared from year-to-date and the previous 2 years at a time. RevPAR and, of course, revenue. And so ultimately, our goal is to ensure the economic vitality of Auburn businesses, whether it's restaurants, bringing people to the table, feet in streets to downtown Auburn and other retail areas, and of course, fill hotels, as this is a regenerating tax fund. So we offer quite a bit of benefits. It injects dollars from the outside region to our local economy, so it does not place a tax burden on our Auburn residents. It cultivates civic pride, so celebrating our traditions, such as Pet-Palooza, Veterans Day Parade, other events that are turning into annual events to look forward to, as well as with new residents, show them what Auburn has in our own backyard. So it's definitely a community benefit to our residents. So now I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, and she's going to tell you about some of our highlights for this past year.
Sorry about that. So I'm really honored to be here this evening and talk about all of the amazing work that tourism has done this year. It has been an exciting year. It's been a productive year. And I'll go pretty quickly because there's actually a lot of highlights and a lot of things that I want to hit on. And one of our goals is to increase Auburn exposure, whether that is internationally, domestically, or in our own backyard. And I have to say, Lorraine is very skilled at coming up with ways to do this and getting the board behind her on it. And she's been really innovative this year with a lot of things that we have that we've accomplished and things that we're looking forward to in 2019. And as part of that exposure, we have the Grassroots Summit was here this year, the Japanese Grassroots Summit, which was a really exciting event and a way to work with international clients and to showcase our area. We also had a really exciting campaign at the airport that was a Port of Seattle grant, made it possible for us to do some advertising in a couple of the concourses there. So not only are people seeing, they're coming and going, they're thinking, Auburn has live racing. Wow, Auburn has car racing. Auburn has a lot of things to offer. Maybe next time I'll stay there, or maybe I'm a local resident that's looking around and really bored because my flight is like 2 hours delayed, because that's what happens at SeaTac. And you're exploring and you're finding new reasons to come to Auburn. Another way to increase exposure is to put ourselves out there in the professional field, whether it's working with the Concierge Association in downtown Seattle to let them know what we have to offer when their guests are looking for activities outside of that downtown Seattle core, or if it's bringing in big conferences, bringing in things that we can now do because we have our amazing community events center, and we have so many things to showcase, and we have all of these assets now that can be activated. And so tourism is a great way to do that by going out to the Northwest Event Show, which Lorraine will be doing next week, and selling our event center and selling our hotels and selling this as a place to come spend your money. And conference people spend money, right? We're also really excited about getting some of our advertising dollars out there, get it circulating, getting our message out, and working with Smart House Creative. We have a fourth quarter ad campaign that's coming out. It's going to be up and down the I-5 corridor. It's going to be a digital campaign. It's focusing on a social media rollout. So we should see that popping up in the next few weeks, that really activates our events, activates our assets in Instagram, Facebook, other social feeds, so that people who are trying to make decisions about their shoulder season vacations see Auburn as a viable option. And Lorraine passed around one of the actual tear-offs from our tourism calendar. I think as being a part of the board a couple of years now, this is probably one of the crowning achievements. It went through a lot of iterations until we got it right, until it was a product that we knew that our concierges were going to be excited about, that our local businesses would be excited about. I will say that before this meeting today, I said, Lorraine, please bring me 2 more of these, because we've already gone through our first one at the museum since our last board meeting. So we know that it's being activated and used, and we're so happy to have that relationship with the BIA to not only have all of our attractions on one side, but to have our businesses featured on the other side. And they were put together some of that finances for the design for that and for the production for that. So it was a true collaboration and making the best out of our resources, which I think is really smart. Another design element that we have going on is the refresh of the tourism board logo. And we are super excited about this logo, and it went through a lot of work, and it was very thoughtful, and our wonderful designer Sarah St. George here at the city made this possible, and she really came through because it's a call to action. You know, we wanted to differentiate just a little bit from the city logo because we want people to think of it as a tourism logo and a reason to come here, but also say what we're about. You know, we don't want skyscrapers on this thing. What we are is a main street, and it has that retro feel to it. It has that look and feel that says there's a quaintness, but there is something exciting there too.
If I could interrupt just one second. Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank
Sorry.
you very much. No, it's great. I love this. This looks great. I love all these logos. I just have one question about one logo. It's the one that's on the, like, between 320th and 312th, right there. Maybe I can just give it to you. Maybe it's just...
Sorry.
What is that?
Someone running?
Someone jogging.
Oh, is that what that is?
So essentially, this map was not meant to be, it was meant to be more kind of visual. It's not scalable. Most people rely on navigational systems. So you'll see, and aside from these call-out boxes of attractions and things to do and see to entice people to stay in Auburn, is you'll see people in movement, you know, showing vibrancy. Auburn, you know, we're active, we have outdoors. Where she's actually jogging, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I'm sure.
No, they all look great. And they're pretty self-explanatory, most of them. I just didn't get that one.
Sure.
Okay. All right, cool.
Thank you.
So as part of, Lorraine mentioned this before, as part of the LTACs, we have a granting arm of that, and so that provides some fundings to some of the events in Auburn and around us. And so our 2018 recipients were Petapalooza, the Veterans Day Parade, the Parrot Festival that was at our Community and Events Center, and Tough Mudder. I believe we should know what those recommendations will be for 2019 because that process just closed on October 5th. So then we'll be able to know which agencies got granting funds this year.
Absolutely. So the LTAC is scheduled to meet in November, and they will review the applicants and then provide you, and I think we're on the agenda sometime in January, to bring you their recommendations so you get to learn about them and learn about the grant applications we received this year for 2019 events.
And some of the work at tourism is, I would say, not particularly glamorous, but it's so essential. And that is continuing education for our people on the front lines in hotels, continuing education for our community. And Lorraine does an amazing job of that. She is out there pounding the pavement, doing all of this work to make sure that everyone is on board, has the same message, knows what assets we have in downtown, knows what assets we have in our park system, knows where to direct people. And as part of that, she does hospitality FAMs, or familiarity events, where she brings concierges around to different attractions and lets them get a kind of behind the scenes look at them. She also circulates a newsletter that is full of really interesting information. If you don't get it, you should, because I learn all the time about new businesses that are opening up and restaurants that I want to try. So I would definitely recommend getting on that list.
Yes, Ms. Trout-Manuel.
And you know, I have to give kudos to Lorraine, because she's only a part-time employee, and she does all of this. And not only this, she's also on other committees for the city as a part-time person. I'm always saying we need to promote her to full-time here pretty soon, because she's getting all this done for our city. I think we need to pay her what she's worth and give her a full-time position soon.
Thank you.
And also, Lorraine is really great at finding ways to make lemons into lemonade. And we saw that with the White River concert season. We know that it was inflated this year because of the work being done on the Tacoma Dome. And there were a lot of traffic headaches, and we all know that. And instead of saying, oh, no, well, this is just going to be like this season, she's like, well, how can we make sure people still have a great experience, especially at our hotels, and that they're going to come back? And came up with this great innovative program to be able to stay and play, to book a night in a hotel and get a shuttle to the concert that has priority egress. So it's making a well-rounded trip. It's going to inspire people to continue to book hotels here in Auburn when they want to see a concert rather than catching a bus from Century League Field. So I thought that was really cool. And then I'm very excited about this. I'll just say that. So if I start getting really hyper. The Auburn Adventure Film Festival is a new event to bring new people into Auburn, to excite the people that live in Auburn, and film festivals are a great way to do that. They build community, they engage in the arts, they feel cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons you go to a film festival is to get that feeling like you're a participant and that you're doing something interesting. And I think we have a really good opportunity with the Auburn Adventure Film Festival, which will be coming up in January. That is Martin Luther King Day weekend. And it's going to be at the Ave. It's going to be downtown. It's strategically placed downtown because we want people to dine before. We want them to go out after. We want them to have a full experience. And as part of that, the festival director that we have contracted with has a great vision for not just buying a ticket to the movie, but buying a ticket to a movie and a complimentary experience. And so those are the ways some of the film packages are being chosen, is to build those experiences in, whether it's a food adventure film paired with Gorgai, which that will be happening, or a mountaineering film paired with a special experience to look at some pioneering mountain photography at the museum, which will be happening. There's a lot of great opportunities to make this festival different from surrounding festivals, and so we are really excited about that. And if you would like to learn more about that and other things happening at the Auburn Tourism we invite you, your friends, your neighbors, to come to our tourism open house. And it's a way to tell the public, it's a way to tell our businesses about what's happening, a way for them to create buy-in, a way for them to get excited about how this might positively affect change in their lives, change in their business, change in their pockets. And as part of that, we are going to have a guest speaker from Brand USA, who I'm sure will draw a crowd. And we should have a big reveal for the film festival as well.
Okay, my colleagues, questions? Yes, Mary.
So similar to what we were talking about with the BIA and the ADA, our tourism, it was doing okay, but it wasn't doing great prior to bringing Lorraine in and Rachel and Doug and his team, really getting behind all of this. We were meeting, but there wasn't a great deal that was being accomplished. And they, Yolanda, you're absolutely right. Things have flourished. And even the concierge books that are going around to many of the businesses here in town. There's one upstairs. If you haven't seen it, before you go into our office, there is the big red book, and those are updated with information about what can be done here in Auburn. And for anybody that thinks we don't have anything to do in Auburn, just pick up that book, because there's quite a bit to be done, and it's the great work that's being done by Lorraine, by Rachel, by the board, that is helping to accomplish that and bringing more events to our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I'm sorry, I just see so, I've seen how much she has brought into our city from day one when I met you, and I kept telling Doug, we are so, you know, he picked the right person to come to Auburn. I know, she did, but she's at a better city. So, but yeah, thank you for all your hard work you're doing on a part-time job.
You definitely win the award for the most colorful presentation. And Mr. Pelosi.
I would just like to say thank you again. This is the best presentation on tourism that I have seen since I've been on council.
Kind of makes you want to go to Auburn, doesn't it?
I mean, it's really, both of you guys, you really get the bubbles flowing here. So thanks again, and thanks Doug and your other group. Yeah, Josh is involved.
Thank you.
So this is good. Thank you, Mayor. Everything's good.
It's my pleasure. Any other questions?
How'd the Parrot Expo go?
Oh, it's actually this weekend.
This
the
weekend.
13th and 14th. And if you haven't been, this is their 5th year in existence. What's interesting is last year was the first time they were in Auburn. So previously they were in Seattle and then Tukwila. But they had the most number of attendees and most number of volunteers since their existence. And to me, one of the amazing things is it's a free community event. So they create an aviary with all these colorful birds that are singing. They do flight demonstrations outside, these free-form flight demonstrations. And then they have a lot of dedicated experts on all things pertaining to Parrot that provide some interesting lectures. So it's very family-friendly, completely free. They do a lot of fundraising beforehand. And so like other grant recipients, when they receive fundings, it's usually to marketing their event, signage, to try to bring in crowds. And one of the most interesting parts, too, is that all of the main organizers live in Auburn. So this has been going on, and with your support, you are supporting the passions of Auburn community residents. And it's also a great testament that here in Auburn, we have a special place in our heart for pets, all pets, right? Petpalooza and Seattle Parrot Expo. So please do, if you have a moment, to go this weekend to the Auburn Community and Event Center and check out their festival.
And what are the times on that?
Let's see, I will have to double check, but it's usually from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and then I believe it's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Sunday, if memory serves.
At our community center.
That's correct, yes. They have rented it out.
I got an inquiry, electronic inquiry from Sweden about it.
Wow. And that's pretty amazing because
I'm a parrot owner.
the goal of the organizers is to every 5 years have an international expo, and they really would like to keep it in Auburn. So part of my role is to provide support not just in the grant application process, but marketing, spreading the word. I do digital marketing campaigns on their behalf, and then kind of guiding them how else can they kind of throw the net out there to tell the community about and surrounding area of the work that they're doing.
10 to 4.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions from council, that wraps up the finance and economic development discussion items. We've added one item to the matrix under finance.
All right.
And I turn it back over to you, Mr. Baggett.
No, it's
Thank you,
under
sir.
municipal service.
Pardon?
What's gonna be added to the finance?
Card room revenues?
No, that should be under municipal service.
I don't care where it's at, it's just, we
under
get a
finance.
finance report.
Well, we haven't really addressed where it's
Oh,
gonna be.
oh, we
I
haven't.
just
Oh.
made a note of it.
All right, I apologize.
That's okay.
No,
We're getting
it
excited.
could be either way.
Well, I don't think we have any other discussion items or new business, but we'll jump into the matrix, and it looks like everything is pretty much accounted for. We do have one TBD under identity theft. Chair Holman. Do we have any date yet in mind for
I
that?
do not.
Okay. Is that still TBD?
We have some privacy issues over a discussion. The promise was to get a case and dissect it so that we'd know from beginning to end how it would proceed with and without the change. But we ran into some privacy issues that have to be worked out. But as soon as they are, it'll come back to prime time.
Very good. Okay, the card room revenues, I think, is that the proper terminology for that?
Gambling revenue, card room revenue, either one.
Where do we think this should be responsibility-wise?
Well, I don't know. I thought it
Finance?
should be municipal services,
Probably we're dealing with finance, so we're dealing with revenues.
but,
What do you think?
wherever, as long as we get it discussed.
Yeah, well, Muni Services will come up sooner than finance again.
Mayor, does that give your staff enough time to put something together if we move it? Date-wise?
I guess, I mean, it can be any time under general topics. I'm just trying to see how it fits under municipal services. I don't see how it fits there. Under what category, Bill?
Well, Mayor, I was just like, was it you, Bob? Bob said if we move it, or John?
No, I know, I'm just asking under,
Oh.
under what part of municipal services did you think it applied?
I guess I scratched it in my head.
Well, we've got
Finance
finance
would be
coming
best,
up on the
but-
December 10th.
Yeah, that's probably, that
Probably too
would give
soon.
Shelley, well, December 10th would give Shelley more time to be
Thank
able
you.
to put something together. Because remember, it's budget season as well, so giving the finance team as much time as they can to work through that.
Casino.
Number 8, graffiti. I didn't realize that I was going to be getting a bunch of emails and some videos from people. I had somebody from California sent me a video on how they're dealing with graffiti. And it's something that I wanted to talk to Chief Lee on if we're doing that. I mean, Pearson. If our city's doing that. The video shows that they have a task force that goes out and takes pictures. And they have a sign that they put down, and with the date and the street and the walls that it was taken, they take a picture and they send it to the police department. So that way the police department doesn't have to go out there and identify the gangs or the whatever the drawings are. Also, I had another, and they said it's police task force. So I just wanted to know if we had such a task force.
Volunteers. APD volunteers, Mayor, used to take photos and send it to.
So, and you also have
You
the
have
app on your
code
phone
enforcement
that
also.
you can do that, and code enforcement does the same
Yeah.
thing. But there are some, I believe, for gang-related activity that police still go out and investigate, correct?
They did this so this way it would relieve the police officers from taking time to going out there, and everything's recorded, and then they paint over it, and they automatically sent everything to the police department. I'll let you look at the video. It's in a email. Then I also had somebody sent me email saying about cameras. Since that bridge where I was talking about the way bridge belongs to the railroad, that we could probably put cameras on the side to have, because you'll be able to see the perpetrators walking in there, and depending on how the police department would put the cameras up, so that way it's not the city. Well, it will be the city, wouldn't it?
Would be the city.
Yeah. So, but anyways, they suggested that, and they said that these type of cameras are used out in the forest, where people that triggered the movement, that it automatically takes pictures. So
Sometimes it's a matter of where they could be located, because we don't have authority to put them on railroad property.
Right, I understand that, but they were saying there's ways of us being able to put it to where it wouldn't affect, having us to deal with the railroad company and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure I show that to either yourself or Chief Pearson. I was going to say Chief Lee again.
I'm sure he'd love a visit.
Yeah, but it was really interesting to see what they're doing in California, because they have to document, and they said that one perpetrator from a specific gang went to 200 places in different, blocks, marking out that gang's sign and putting his on there, and they charge him $250 for each one of them that they.
I would encourage, we know we have coming up on November 13th, this particular thing. I suggest maybe you get with Chair Brown and Vice Chair Pelosi perhaps and collaborate on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That would be a good thing, and
Sounds
put
good.
together your presentation. Thank you. Okay, are there any other new additions or anything else to add to the matrix at this
Where are we
time?
going to put the casino review?
That's on December 10th under
December
finance.
10th.
Oh, that's under blue. All right.
Okay. Oh, there being no further items in front of the council, I would adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
And Bill, if there's anything specific that you want to see